Ladies and gentlemen, when someone reaches out to you, the natural tendency is to react immediately, often without full awareness of the emotions driving that reaction. This is one of the greatest pitfalls in communication, responding with emotion instead of reason. When emotions take control, they distort perception, cloud judgment, and create unnecessary conflict. The wise understand that emotions are fleeting, unreliable, and often deceptive. They do not reject emotions entirely, but they refuse to be ruled by them. Consider a moment when someone has spoken to you in anger. Perhaps they accused you unfairly, insulted you, or dismissed something important to you. The immediate impulse is to defend, to retaliate, to make yourself heard. But in that moment, if you are ruled by emotion, you lose clarity. Anger rises, and with it, reason diminishes. You speak words you may later regret, or you act in a way that escalates the conflict rather than resolves it. This is not strength. It is weakness disguised as strength. True power lies in restraint, in the ability to master yourself rather than be mastered by impulse. One must remember that words spoken in anger are rarely about truth. They are about the speaker's state of mind, their frustrations, their fears, their insecurities. If you react in kind, you have let their turmoil become your own. If you absorb their emotion and respond without control, you have surrendered your peace. The wise man does not hand over his tranquility so easily. He observes, he understands, and he chooses his response carefully, if he chooses to respond at all. It is easy to assume that reacting emotionally is a sign of sincerity. People say, "I speak from the heart," as if that alone justifies their words. But the heart is fickle, swayed by momentary passions. What is said in the heat of the moment may not reflect true belief, only temporary feeling. Reason is not cold or indifferent, it is steady. It allows one to navigate emotion without being overwhelmed by it. To master this, one must first become aware of the signs of emotional reaction. A quickened heartbeat, a tense jaw, a sudden rush of words forming before thought has fully settled. These are warnings, signals that the mind is being pushed aside by emotion. When you notice this happening, pause. Do nothing. Let the emotion pass like a wave that crashes and retreats. Only then should you decide if a response is necessary, and if so, what that response should be. Silence is often more powerful than speech. Those who react emotionally fear silence because it forces them to sit with their feelings, to confront them rather than release them onto others. But silence gives space for clarity. It allows you to observe not just what was said, but why it was said. It gives time to ask, what does this person truly want? What is driving their words? And most importantly, does this deserve my energy? Many conflicts arise not because of what was originally said, but because of how people react to it. A careless comment, an inconsiderate remark, these can be ignored and forgotten unless met with equal emotion, turning small moments into great battles. When you learn to detach from these triggers, you become unshakable. You no longer give others the power to dictate your state of mind. Their words remain theirs, they do not become yours. This does not mean one should suppress emotions entirely. Emotion has its place, it provides depth, passion, connection. But it must be guided by reason, not unleashed without control. There is a difference between feeling something and acting upon it. To feel anger is natural, to let anger control you is destructive. To feel hurt is human, to lash out in response is unwise. Emotion should inform, not dictate. In moments of tension, remind yourself, a response born of emotion is rarely the best response. If someone insults you, what do you gain by returning the insult? If someone raises their voice, what do you accomplish by matching their volume? There is greater impact in remaining composed, in showing that you are not easily moved. The person who does not react as expected unsettles others. They command respect not through force, but through presence. Imagine two men standing in a storm. One yells at the wind, cursing it, trying to overpower it with his voice. The other stands in silence, letting the wind pass, unmoved. Who is stronger? The one who fights against what he cannot control, or the one who remains steady despite it? The same applies in conversation. If you fight every storm of emotion, you exhaust yourself. If you let it pass, you remain whole. Over time, as you practice restraint, you will notice something remarkable. Those who once provoked you lose their power over you. Their words no longer stir you as they once did. Their anger, their frustration, their attempts to pull you into conflict become ineffective. You become an observer rather than a participant in their emotional turmoil. This is freedom, not being unfeeling, but being untouchable. So the next time someone reaches out to you, whether with anger, urgency, or even praise, take a moment before you respond. Observe your emotions, but do not let them dictate your words. Consider what truly matters. Speak only when your words are chosen with intention, not impulse. In doing so, you will not only avoid regret, you will gain the respect of others and, more importantly, mastery over yourself. When someone speaks to you, the urge to respond quickly is strong. There is a sense of pressure, a silent demand to fill the space, to prove you have understood, to assert your presence. But this impulse is often a trap. To speak before understanding is to build a bridge before knowing where it should lead. It is to fire an arrow before seeing the target. The wise do not rush to answer. They pause, they listen, they reflect. In this they avoid many mistakes that those driven by impulse frequently make. Words once spoken cannot be taken back. A hasty response, given without full comprehension, may lead to confusion, conflict, or even unintended harm. Many arguments arise not from true disagreement, but from misinterpretation. One person responds not to what was truly said, but to what they assumed was meant. And assumptions, when left unchallenged, become a dangerous foundation for conversation. To assume is to replace reality with one's own projections. It is to mistake one's thoughts for truth. The person who rushes to answer often does so based on assumptions rather than actual understanding, and in doing so, they risk speaking in error. True understanding is not passive. It requires effort. It demands patience. It is not enough to hear words. One must grasp their meaning, their intent, and the context in which they are spoken. Many listen only to prepare their reply, not to genuinely absorb what is being said. They wait for a pause, for a gap in speech, ready to interject their thoughts, but in doing so they lose what is being communicated. They respond not to the full message but to fragments of it. Their answer, therefore, is incomplete, misaligned, or entirely misguided. Consider how often a person interrupts another mid-sentence, assuming they already know where the thought is leading. This is an act of impatience, an assumption that one already possesses the necessary knowledge. Yet, more often than not, such interruptions reveal a lack of true attention. The speaker may have been about to say something different, to add context, to clarify their meaning. But the one who rushes to answer has already closed their ears, already decided what the message is, already moved to respond before they have fully received. This is not wisdom. It is a failure to listen. Silence, though uncomfortable for some, is often the mark of true understanding. The wise do not fear a pause in conversation. They do not rush to fill every moment with speech. Instead, they take their time. They allow words to settle, to be processed, to be understood in their entirety. And only then do they decide if a response is necessary, and if so, what that response should be. In this way, their words carry weight, not because they are many, but because they are measured. There is power in restraint. The one who rushes to answer often speaks carelessly, revealing ignorance, misunderstanding, or misplaced confidence. But the one who waits, who listens fully before responding, commands respect. Their words are not driven by the need to be heard, but by the need to be precise. They do not waste speech on empty reactions. They ensure that when they speak, it is with purpose. Many conflicts could be avoided if people did not feel the need to answer immediately. How often does regret follow a hastily spoken response? Words said in haste can wound, can mislead, can create distance rather than understanding. But the person who takes a moment, who considers before they reply, prevents much unnecessary trouble. They give themselves the space to reflect, to weigh their words, to ensure that what they say is aligned with what they mean. Patience in conversation is a rare skill. It requires one to let go of ego, to accept that understanding is more important than appearing knowledgeable. The need to be right, the need to prove oneself, the need to dominate a discussion, these are all forms of insecurity disguised as confidence. True confidence does not need to rush. It does not need to force itself into the conversation. It waits, it observes, it understands, and only then does it speak. There is also wisdom in knowing when not to answer at all. Not every statement requires a response. Not every conversation needs your voice. Sometimes silence itself is the best answer, for it shows that you are not bound by impulse, that you do not feel the need to insert yourself into every exchange. Those who speak merely to be heard often say little of value. Those who wait, who ensure they understand before they contribute, offer words that matter. In the end, to answer without understanding is to risk speaking without truth. And to speak without truth is to diminish oneself. The solution is simple, yet difficult in practice. Slow down, listen fully, do not fear silence. Do not let the impulse to reply override the necessity of comprehension. Let your words be deliberate, not rushed. For in doing so you will not only avoid misunderstandings, you will cultivate respect, clarity and true wisdom. When someone speaks, criticizes or even offends, the instinct to take their words personally is strong. It feels as though their words are an attack on our very identity, as if their judgment holds the power to define us. This reaction is natural, but it is also misguided. To take everything personally is to hand over control of your emotions to others, allowing their words, opinions, and moods to dictate your state of mind. It is to live as a puppet, pulled in different directions by the shifting winds of other people's perceptions. The wise do not grant others this power. They understand that what is said by another is more a reflection of the speaker than the one spoken to. People speak from their own experiences, their own emotions, their own unresolved conflicts. A person who insults you is often revealing more about themselves than about you. Their anger, their frustration, their bitterness, it is theirs to carry, not yours. If you take their words personally, you have taken on a burden that was never yours to bear. You have allowed someone else's storm to disrupt your inner peace. But why should their storm become your own? Why should their opinion, formed by their own limited perspective, define your sense of self? There is great freedom in realizing that most people are not truly thinking about you as much as you assume. They are wrapped up in their own concerns, their own struggles, their own desires. When someone criticizes or dismisses you, it is often not about you at all. It is about their expectations, their frustrations, their own inner conflicts projected outward. They may not even realize why they react the way they do. If they do not fully understand themselves, why should their words hold absolute truth for you? Imagine a traveler passing through a village. Along the way, a stranger shouts insults at him. The traveler has two choices. He can stop, engage with the stranger, argue and let the anger fester inside him. Or he can continue walking, unaffected, recognizing that the words of a stranger do not change his path. Which choice is wiser? To carry on with purpose, unaffected by meaningless distractions, or to be weighed down by every passing comment? Those who take everything personally are like the traveler who stops at every insult, exhausting themselves in pointless battles. Those who understand that words are merely sounds, opinions merely perspectives, move forward unbothered. Even praise should not be taken too personally. If you allow yourself to be lifted too high by compliments, you will also allow yourself to be brought down by criticism. Praise and blame are two sides of the same coin, both dependent on the judgments of others. If your confidence is built on the approval of people, it will crumble when that approval is taken away. Instead, stability comes from within, from a firm understanding of who you are, independent of what others say. It is also important to recognize that when people speak harshly, they are often reacting to their own internal struggles. A rude remark may stem from stress, insecurity, or pain. If someone lashes out, it is rarely about you, it is about something unresolved within them. If you take their words as a personal attack, you misunderstand the nature of human behavior. The person who snaps at you in frustration may be dealing with problems unknown to you. The co-worker who dismisses your ideas may be struggling with their own fears of inadequacy. The friend who becomes distant may be battling inner doubts that have nothing to do with you. If you take their actions personally, you create suffering for yourself where none was needed. This is not to say that feedback should always be ignored. There is value in criticism if it is constructive, if it is given with sincerity and thought. But even then, it must be filtered through reason. Is the criticism fair? Is it useful? Does it come from a place of understanding, or is it simply an expression of someone's emotions in the moment? If the feedback is valuable, accept it with gratitude and use it to grow. If it is not, let it pass without reaction. Not every opinion is worth holding on to. Not every remark deserves space in your mind. A person who takes everything personally is easily controlled. They are at the mercy of others, constantly adjusting their mood based on the words and actions of those around them. But the person who learns to detach from external judgments becomes unshakable. They recognize that their worth is not determined by shifting opinions. They are free not because they are indifferent, but because they understand that true confidence comes from within, not from the validation or criticism of others. The moment you stop taking everything personally, you gain clarity. You see people's words and actions for what they truly are, expressions of their own inner world, not reflections of your worth. You become less reactive, less disturbed, more in control of your emotions. You walk through life lighter, unburdened by unnecessary suffering. You reclaim your peace, your stability, your strength. There is an invisible pressure that exists in human interaction, the expectation to respond. When someone reaches out, asks a question, makes a comment, or even demands attention, there is an instinct to reply, to acknowledge, to engage. This pressure is deeply ingrained, as if silence is an offense, as if failing to respond is an act of neglect or disrespect. But this is an illusion. The truth is, not every message requires an answer. Not every question deserves your time, and not every call to engage is worth heeding. The wise understand this and do not feel bound by the expectation to respond to everything that comes their way. One of the greatest mistakes people make is believing they owe a response simply because someone has spoken to them. This belief leads to unnecessary obligations, wasted energy, and misplaced priorities. Time is limited, attention is valuable, and not every interaction is worthy of either. The person who feels obligated to respond to everything spreads themselves thin, constantly pulled in different directions, constantly reacting rather than choosing where to focus their forceful energy. They become exhausted not because they are doing what is meaningful, but because they are doing what is expected. It is important to recognize that many messages, questions, and conversations are not truly about seeking an answer, they are about seeking attention. Some people speak not because they have something important to say, but simply because they do not want to be alone in their thoughts. They reach out not because they require your response, but because they desire validation, engagement, or entertainment. If you feel obligated to respond to every such interaction, you become a tool for others rather than a master of your own time. The wise do not give away their attention so easily. They choose where to engage, when to speak, and when to remain silent. There is also the fear of offending others by not responding. Many believe that ignoring a message is rude, that failing to reply is a sign of disrespect. But this, too, is an illusion. True respect is not measured by one's willingness to always respond. It is measured by one's ability to engage meaningfully when it truly matters. A person who replies out of obligation, with no real intention or sincerity, is not offering true respect. They are simply avoiding discomfort. A response given reluctantly is often worse than no response at all. It lacks presence, lacks thought, lacks genuine care. Social expectations create an even deeper pressure to respond. Whether in friendships, work environments, or casual interactions, people often feel trapped by the fear of seeming unresponsive. If a colleague sends an unnecessary email, there is pressure to reply. If an acquaintance reaches out with a question they could have answered themselves, there is pressure to engage. But this constant cycle of reaction is draining. The person who responds to everything without discretion ends up sacrificing their own priorities for the sake of fulfilling social expectations that may not even serve them. There is a difference between ignoring out of carelessness and choosing silence as an intentional act. The latter is not avoidance, it is discernment. The wise person asks, is this worth my time? Does this require my energy? Is my response necessary, or am I simply reacting out of habit? If the answer does not serve their greater purpose, they do not feel guilty about remaining silent. They do not need to justify their lack of response, for they understand that their energy is finite, and it is theirs to manage. Many conflicts arise because people feel pressured to respond when they should have remained silent. A heated argument escalates because one person felt the need to reply to every remark. A pointless debate drags on because neither side was willing to let the conversation end. A simple misunderstanding turns into resentment because someone responded out of irritation rather than choosing to let go. If more people understood the power of not responding, they would find themselves in far fewer unnecessary conflicts. Silence is often the best answer, not as an act of avoidance, but as an act of wisdom. This also applies to messages designed to provoke. There are those who speak not to communicate, but to incite a reaction. Their words are bait, intended to pull you into their emotions, their frustration, their agenda. To respond to such messages is to reward their behavior, to give them what they seek. The wise person does not fall into this trap. They recognize the nature of such communication and refuse to engage. They understand that not responding is not weakness, it is strength. It is the refusal to be manipulated by the emotions of others. Even in moments where a response seems expected, one must ask, is my voice necessary here? Silence can be more powerful than words. A well-placed pause can shift the direction of a conversation. The absence of a reply can speak louder than any message. There is power in restraint, in choosing when to engage and when to remain still. A person who understands this does not feel burdened by obligation. They feel liberated by choice. In a world that constantly demands attention, the ability to withhold a response is a rare and valuable skill. It is not about ignoring people mindlessly, but about choosing wisely where to place your energy. It is about understanding that your time is yours, that your peace is yours, and that you do not owe a response simply because someone expects one. The moment you realize this, you reclaim your freedom. You become intentional with your words, deliberate with your interactions, and no longer a servant to the expectations of others. In conversation, discussion, or debate, many people approach interactions with a singular objective: to win. They seek to outwit, outargue, and outshine the other person, as if every exchange is a competition that must be won at all costs. This desire to dominate the conversation, to emerge victorious, blinds them to the true purpose of communication: understanding. When winning becomes the goal, truth is often sacrificed. Ego takes center stage, and the interaction becomes less about learning and more about proving superiority. The wise recognize this trap and avoid it. They understand that not every discussion needs a winner, and that the strongest position is often one that does not seek to conquer but to comprehend. The need to win stems from insecurity. A person who is confident in their knowledge, their beliefs, and their reasoning does not feel threatened by opposing views. They do not feel the need to force their perspective onto others. But those who are uncertain, who fear being seen as wrong or weak, often engage in conversation as if their very identity depends on winning. To them, losing an argument is not just about being incorrect, it is about losing face, losing respect, or appearing inferior. This mindset turns every discussion into a battlefield, where the objective is not mutual growth but personal victory. In the pursuit of winning, people often become dishonest without realizing it. They twist words, misrepresent ideas, and refuse to acknowledge valid points simply because doing so would feel like conceding defeat. They engage in tactics meant to weaken the other person's position rather than to strengthen their own understanding. They interrupt, they raise their voice, they dismiss counter-arguments without proper consideration. They become more concerned with how they appear rather than whether what they are saying is actually correct. In doing so, they lose sight of the original purpose of the exchange: to reach a greater understanding of the truth. Many conversations become circular and exhausting because neither side is willing to let go of the need to win. Each person clings to their stance, refusing to yield even when confronted with logic that challenges their position. Their goal is no longer to discover what is right but to avoid being seen as wrong. This creates a futile cycle where neither person listens with an open mind and neither learns anything new. The result is not progress but frustration, wasted time, and unnecessary conflict. The wise person does not engage in such battles. They do not see discussion as an arena for proving themselves, but as an opportunity to refine their understanding. One of the most damaging consequences of seeking to win every exchange is the tendency to silence others. When people are more focused on victory than understanding, they do not allow space for different perspectives to be expressed. They dominate the conversation, dismiss alternative views, and discourage meaningful dialogue. They create an environment where the loudest voice prevails, not the most thoughtful one. This approach does not lead to wisdom or progress, it leads to intellectual stagnation, where only one viewpoint is heard while others are suppressed. There is also the danger of damaging relationships in the pursuit of winning. Friendships, professional relationships, and even family bonds can suffer when one person is obsessed with proving themselves right. Conversations that could have led to deeper connection instead turn into conflicts, where both sides walk away feeling unheard, disrespected, or resentful. A person who always seeks to win may find themselves winning arguments but losing people. And what is the value in being right if it comes at the cost of mutual respect and harmony? The desire to win often makes people blind to their own ignorance. No one knows everything, and no one is beyond error. The person who assumes they must always be right is a person who closes themselves off from growth. The wise understand that to be corrected is not a loss but a gain. To be proven wrong is not a humiliation but an opportunity to refine one's perspective. They welcome new insights, even if those insights challenge their current beliefs. They do not see intellectual humility as weakness but as strength. Sometimes the best response is no response. Not every argument is worth engaging in. Not every disagreement needs to be resolved through debate. The person who always seeks to win wastes their energy on battles that do not need to be fought. There is wisdom in knowing when to walk away, when to let a conversation end without a victor, when to prioritize peace over pride. Winning an exchange may bring a temporary sense of satisfaction, but true wisdom lies in knowing that understanding is more valuable than dominance. The goal of conversation should not be to defeat but to discover, not to conquer but to connect. There is a quiet but constant influence that the moods of others exert on our own. When someone is angry, their frustration can pull us into their storm. When they are anxious, their worry spreads like a contagion. When they are dismissive or cold, we instinctively feel the need to either retreat or react. This is the unspoken power that emotions have over those who do not guard their inner stability. The person who allows the moods of others to dictate their own is not in control of themselves. They are at the mercy of external forces. The wise recognize this danger and remain unmoved, maintaining their own state of mind regardless of what others project onto them. When another person is upset, it is easy to absorb their negativity, as if their frustration must become our own. A co-worker is having a bad day and suddenly our own mood shifts. A family member is irritable, and without realizing it, we too become tense. This happens because emotions, especially strong ones, have a way of influencing those around them. But just because someone else is experiencing anger, sadness, or anxiety does not mean we must take it on ourselves. Their emotional state is their own. It does not have to become ours. We are not responsible for carrying the weight of another person's feelings unless we choose to. There is a difference between empathy and emotional entanglement. Empathy is the ability to understand and acknowledge another person's emotions without being overtaken by them. It allows for connection without surrendering personal peace. Emotional entanglement, on the other hand, is when another person's emotions dictate our own, pulling us into their turmoil as if we have no choice. The wise practice empathy without attachment. They recognize when someone is suffering, but they do not allow that suffering to consume them. They offer understanding without losing themselves in the emotional waves of others. When a person allows their mood to be dictated by others, they lose their own center. They become reactive rather than intentional. If someone speaks with anger, they respond with anger. If someone is dismissive, they feel unworthy. If someone is anxious, they absorb that anxiety and carry it as their own. In this way, they are no longer in control of their own emotions. They are simply mirroring whatever energy surrounds them. This is a dangerous way to live because it means that peace is never truly theirs. It is always dependent on how others feel. A person who seeks peace must learn to generate it from within, rather than hoping to find it in the moods of others. Many conflicts escalate simply because one person absorbs the emotions of another and reacts without thinking. A simple misunderstanding can turn into a heated argument because frustration is met with frustration. An off-founded comment can ruin a day because irritation is internalized rather than ignored. But if a person refuses to be controlled by the moods of others, they become untouchable. They respond with clarity rather than impulse, with reason rather than reaction. They see emotions for what they are, passing states, not absolute truths. Detachment does not mean indifference. It does not mean ignoring the struggles of others or refusing to engage with their emotions. It simply means maintaining personal control over one's own state of mind. A person who is emotionally grounded can listen to another's anger without becoming angry themselves. They can witness another's sadness without sinking into despair. They can acknowledge another's anxiety without adopting it. They understand that they are separate from the emotional storms of others, and they do not have to be swept away by them. It is also important to recognize that many people project their emotions onto others without realizing it. A person who is angry will try to provoke anger in those around them. A person who is anxious spread worry wherever they go. This is not always done consciously, it is simply human nature. But the wise person does not allow themselves to be pulled into this unconscious cycle. They do not take the bait of another's frustration. They do not allow themselves to be manipulated by the shifting emotions of those around them. They remain steady, knowing that their own peace is theirs to protect. One of the most valuable skills a person can develop is the ability to observe emotions without immediately reacting to them. When someone is upset, instead of immediately responding with equal emotion, one can pause and ask, is this emotion mine? Do I need to carry it? Am I responding to the situation itself, or am I merely reflecting the emotions of another? These simple moments of reflection create space between stimulus and response, allowing for choice rather than automatic reaction. Maintaining emotional independence does not mean shutting others out. It does not mean ignoring those who are struggling. It means offering support without losing oneself. It means being present without being overtaken. It means choosing one's own emotional state rather than allowing it to be dictated by external forces. The person who masters this becomes unshakable. They walk through life unaffected by the turbulence around them, steady in their own peace, knowing that they alone have control over their emotions. They are no longer controlled by the moods of others, but instead, they bring calm to the chaos. True strength lies not in controlling others, but in mastering oneself. The person who remains steady in their own emotions, unaffected by the shifting moods of those around them, possesses a rare and invaluable power. They do not react impulsively, nor do they allow the storms of others to pull them off course. Instead, they stand firm, choosing their responses with wisdom rather than reflex. In a world where emotions fluctuate constantly, where people project their frustrations, fears, and anxieties onto others without realizing it, the ability to remain centered is a form of freedom. It means no longer being a prisoner to the moods of those around you. It means moving through life with clarity, with purpose, and with an unshakable peace that cannot be taken away by the emotions of another. Let others feel what they feel. Let them react how they choose. But do not let their emotions become your own. Your peace is yours to protect. Your mind is yours to govern. And the moment you decide that your state of being is not dictated by anyone else, you reclaim the power that was always meant to be yours.